Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Dan Smith. I am the president of Exceeding the Expectation, the campus advocacy group for disabilities on and off campus. And what we're basically going to be doing today is we're going to be holding a panel on the disability experience, whether it be in student life, whether it be in day-to-day life. We're going to be talking about some of the realities of living with a disability, and we're going to be talking about all of the accommodations that are and are not being met, whether it be in the outside world or whether it be right here on the Wagner College campus. And just to give you an idea as to how this afternoon is going to work, we're going to start by giving each panelist 8 to 10 minutes to talk about their own personal experience. They're going to tell you about their own disability, what it means for them, and some of the challenges that they have faced, whether on campus or off, because of said disability. And then after that, what's going to happen is that I'm going to ask a few guiding questions just to make sure that we cover everything that we set out to cover today. And after that, we're going to open up the floor to you guys, because I know we have a lot of PAs in the house, correct? And a lot of nursing majors, a lot of people like that. And so we want to make sure that we leave ample time for you guys to ask your questions so that you can get the most out of this experience. So I guess without further ado, we'll just work our way down the panel. If we want to go down this way.
Sure.
If you just want to introduce yourself briefly, just introduce yourself, what you're going to be speaking on today, and then we'll work our way back and we'll start with the individual presentations.
Okay, hi everybody. My name is Gianna Chianchiano. I'm a senior here at Wagner College, so I'm just going to get right to it. So I'm going to start off with a personal anecdote. So it all started in elementary school. It was kindergarten to be exact. It was the second week of school, and my kindergarten class and I trekked up the same staircase we always did to get to our classroom. I noticed I was really hurting when I would walk up the stairs. I would see all my friends walking up the stairs perfectly fine, and when I would walk up these stairs, I would still be on the second or third step, and I was in so much pain afterwards. The worst of it came when I was at recess one day, and my friends and I were playing tag. We were running around and having fun. My friend hit me rather hard, and I fell over on my side, and I could not get up without help, and my legs were in a lot of pain. I did not know what was going on, and if this was normal, or if it was just a cramp or something worse. My family started to become concerned about it, and we went to the doctor, and a test came back, and the numbers were sky high. They were in the 12,000s when they should have been in the hundreds, which meant something was not quite right with me. The many doctors that I went to diagnosed me with a condition called myotonia congenita. It is a disorder that affects my muscles that are used for movement, most likely skeletal muscles. It begins in childhood, and people with my condition experience bouts of sustained muscle stiffness and tensing. Although myotonia can affect any skeletal muscles, including the muscles of my face, my tongue, it occurs most often in the legs. So myotonia causes muscle stiffness that can interfere with movement. So basically, this disorder affects the muscles in a sense of the stuff that replenishes our muscles to make them healthy and strong. And it's not so prevalent in the body as a normal human being who does not have the disorder that can interfere with movement following a period of rest. So in some people, the stiffness is very mild. While someone could be running really hard for 30 minutes and they could be in severe pain because the muscles they put in like a sense are slowly dying on the inside. So it's not really that bad for me. As you notice about myself, I am a pretty healthy looking girl. I'm trying not to brag or anything like that, but compared to others, I look healthy. I look like nothing's really wrong with me. But when I tell people that I have a disorder, they're always shocked that because I can walk, I can jump, but there are many people with my disorder that can't. This phenomenon is called an invisible disability. So many people do not know about this term, but it simply means that it's certain physical, mental, or neurological condition that it limits a person's movements, senses, and activities that it's invisible to the onlooker. So unfortunately, this fact can lead to many misconceptions and judgments, but I will touch upon this later. So even though there is no cure for people with my condition, but they can still live normal lives with various accommodations needed. So before I get into the accommodations, just like Dan said in his opening, I wanted to let everybody know that I cannot speak for the whole population of myotonia congenita. These are just accommodations that work for me. What may work for me may not work for others with my condition. But for me, the main accommodation needed is an elevator or an escalator to access the upper levels of buildings, train stations, etc. The stairs are my biggest challenge. In middle school and high school, I switched classes back and forth, so I would ask my teachers if I could leave a few minutes early to get to my next class. There were a lot of floors and stairs in my middle school in which there was no elevator access. This was not accessible for my condition at all. Whereas in high school, only one building had an elevator accessible. This building was a newly constructed building, so my high school was like a college campus type feel where we would go like back and forth to classes, and I would use this elevator in that building, but the other buildings I had to walk the stairs. I was fortunate enough that my myotonia symptoms did not affect me severely when I would walk back and forth to my classes in my years of schooling, but for some people this is not the case, and they may not be able to attend these schools because their symptoms are much severe than mine, but in which these places are not accessible to their needs, such as elevators, etc. In the workplace, there are jobs where sudden movements might be required and could present a challenge because my symptoms occur after a period of rest. So let's say I'm working at an office where I sit in a chair for 2 to 3 hours and I have to get up to move. That would be hard for me because I won't be able to complete the task. So even so, I may not be able to take the job because it's not accessible to my disability. What is even worse is if I wanted to claim Social Security, I couldn't because myotonia congenita is not considered a disabling disability. In other words, I would not be awarded any disability benefits. So also environment is very important for people with my condition. For instance, if it's really cold outside, my symptoms can become occasionally constantly worse, severe. I get so much muscle stiffness. So if I'm walking outside in the cold, it affects my performance and I'm ultimately not able to complete any task. I know the winter cold for me is the worst with walking outside. So I have a handicap parking pass that I use here at school or when I go like in public places. My doctor prescribed it to me, and I use it more in cold settings or if I have to walk long distances in parking lots. One time, an elderly couple saw me in the spot. I think it was at the mall, and they were staring up at me, up and down, and I immediately knew what they were thinking. They saw a healthy-looking girl, nothing wrong with her, because I wasn't moving yet. And as soon as I started to move, then they saw that I had something wrong with me. But before that, they just thought right away that, oh, nothing's wrong with you, taking judgments, and that's where I get back to my point of invisible disability, in which this is where that misunderstandings come into play, that many people do not know about these disabilities because they view disability as just someone in a wheelchair, someone with a walking stick. Then this translates to accessibility, in which it's just a wheelchair ramp and an elevator, but it extends more than that, as I had stated earlier. So what I hope that you guys got out of my speech and this panel is that accessibility is having access to all places with the appropriate disability accommodations put in place, such as elevators, leaving class a few minutes early, having a note taker in class if you have a visual impairment, all of those things. If you do not already realize, people with disability are just important as you are. They might look different, they might talk different, they might walk different, but the truth is they're just as much human as you are. They have feelings, thoughts, emotions, and goals in their lives, such as attending college and having a successful job, but they may never be able to reach those goals because public spaces don't have the accommodations and accessible places and things put in place for them. So that's why society and those in power need to be aware of the disability accessibility accommodations so that all people with disabilities can access them.
Okay, hello. My name is Jennifer Weile. I am a graduating graduate student here. Thank you for coming to Exceeding the Expectations' 3rd annual spring panel. And I want you to picture this. It's a Sunday afternoon about 6 months ago. I go out to eat in a very nice restaurant to celebrate a birthday of a close family member. It just so happens that nearly everybody else on Staten Island is at this restaurant celebrating birthdays on this particular afternoon. Now I can see why. It was a nice restaurant, good food. What wasn't so nice on this particular day about the restaurant was the atmosphere. They were clearly very busy and maximizing every square centimeter of space that they had. But I don't fault them for that. They wanted to accommodate all their patrons and make the most money possible that night. Even worse, though, is the happy birthday song. It may have just been like every other happy birthday song, but it was extremely, extremely loud. Each time they played this song, which had to be at least a dozen times, I cringed. I shook. I started to cover my ears, and as much as I braced myself for it, I was never quite ready. To which the person whose birthday I was celebrating that night looked at me and said, "It's really not that loud." I don't know why it's bothering you. Maybe in my rage I snapped a bit, but once I gained my cool, I took a breath. I started to explain that while it may not have been loud to her, with my sensory issues, it was amplified. And that is why it was bothering me so much, and it wasn't just I was trying to ruin her birthday celebration. That was truly the last thing on my agenda. Now, why do I have the sensory issues that I do? At the age of 5, I was diagnosed with what was then referred to as Asperger's syndrome, now known as an autism spectrum disorder. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, the autism spectrum is defined as a developmental disorder that affects communication and behavior. The latest DSM lists 3 traits of somebody on the autism spectrum. The first one, difficulty with communication and interaction with other people. The second, restricted interests and repeated behaviors. The third, symptoms that hurt the person's ability to function in school, work, and other areas of life. I admit, when I did my research to prepare my remarks for today's event, I got a little disheartened when I read these comments, especially the third one. When I look at the first 2, though, they do kind of describe me. I do have difficulty with communication and interaction with other people. Part of the reason why I did prepare these remarks was because it's harder for me to think on the spot than to go by something prescribed. Other panelists here may be going off the top of their head, but I don't think I could. I'd forget too many things, get so excited, and go completely off track. Some of you may have seen that meme on Facebook about the person who tells the story and gets distracted 200 times. That's me. I tell people all the time, if I told you this story, just stop me. I notice I don't always make eye contact either. If we're having a conversation and I'm not making eye contact, no, I'm still paying attention. I just can't stay focused on one thing for too long. You also may notice if we're at a restaurant, I start to tear up my straw wrappers. That's just my way of sitting still. Professors here are classmates of mine. You may watch me as I sit in my lecture class, drawing in the margins of my notebook. I'm twisting a pen right now. Again, I'm paying attention, but I probably find your lecture quite interesting. I just can't sit there and listen and do nothing else. The second trait in the DSM is restrained interest in repetitive behaviors. I also have very restrained interest in repetitive behaviors, which I'm very passionate about. First thing, my family. Second, the American historical and political structure. Not necessarily American modern politics, but that's too much of another conversation. But I'm fascinated by the foundations of our government, how it was started, and the buildings. Go with me to Washington, D.C. I can serve as your tour guide. Just something that interests me. The third, as most of us here today, disability accommodation. I'll stop you in conversation if you use the R word. I'm not judging you. And I know you don't mean it in a derogatory sense, but it's something that bugs me. People in the past have even asked me, given a magic cure, would you give up your disability? Most expect an answer of yes, absolutely, but the truth is, I don't know. I don't know if I'd want to give up my passions and how strong I feel about them. And if I didn't have my disability, would I have the same strength? I don't know. The third characteristic, though, is the reason why we're all here today. Symptoms that hurt the person's ability to function properly in school and work in other areas of life. I'm going to tell you right now, I was the first grader, 6 years old, in a 12-1-1 class with a teacher who was older and very old school. It was probably her goal, like the goal of most of the time, to normalize their students and make them as though they didn't have their disabilities. But she yelled at me again and again at the age of 6 because I had bad handwriting. And then proceeded to tell my parents that I would never make it in a non-12-1 class. Now I know, there's nothing wrong with being in a 12-1. But that's if it's the best fit. For me, it wasn't. But the reason she probably thought that is because I didn't have the necessary accommodations to reach my full potential. Now I'm not trying to sit here and brag or toot my own horn, but I'm happy to say that 17 years later, I graduated cum laude in 2006 with my undergrad, and I'm 6 weeks away from earning my master's. and becoming a special education teacher myself. I also hold 2 jobs. I work as a graduate assistant here on campus, and I work as a teaching assistant at an early intervention center. All is possible because I have the necessary accommodations and know my strengths and weaknesses, and I don't try to deny my limitations. I'm open with them, I'm upfront about them, because if I ignore them, it's just not a pleasant situation for all involved. When we think of accommodation and accessibility, most of us tend to think of the expensive, we have to put an elevator, it's going to cost $1 million. Which I admit it is true. But for some disabilities like myself, it's not that. Accommodations are relatively low cost, and it's typically just a change in your attitude, a change in the culture, and a change in the way that you think about things. I would now like to share what works for me and what doesn't, just so you know. As Dan mentioned, Gianna mentioned, as panelists, we represent our disability categories, but we only speak for ourselves. So things that work for me might not work for somebody on the autism spectrum. It's a spectrum, it affects each person differently. I'm going to share them so that I can give you a basis and you can have them in your mind. The first thing that doesn't work, extremely loud settings because of my sensory processing. As I was preparing my remarks here, I read that for a person on the autism spectrum, having a sensory overload is equivalent to a regular person having a broken leg, pain-wise. It's just not enjoyable. If you invite me to your birthday party and there's loud music, I'm either going to politely decline, or I'm going to reschedule with you, or if I do go, I'll probably leave the room multiple times and just go outside and clear my head and give my ears a break. It's just much more pleasant. Also, if I'm in a setting where I have to sit still, it doesn't work. I'm admitting it. I've sat at funerals and done lanyard while I've listened to the remarks. I've looked at programs at plays just to keep busy. And I draw in class while watching movies or to lecture. A piece of advice to any future teachers here: if you notice a student who can't sit still, just hand them something like a stress ball so they can squeeze it. It'll probably make them listen to your lecture a lot better. We're not trying to be disrespectful. It can't be done otherwise. Also, very sensitive taste buds. A lot of foods I stay clear of because the spice in the average food, magnified. And these are my ways of, as the DSM put it, trying to function properly in all way of life. 2 years ago, I go to the eye doctor, and for those of you medical professionals in the room, he's trying to shine that bright light right into my eye, and I just couldn't keep my eye open as he's shining a bright light in it. So when I told him I can't have people just touching my eye and shining a light in it, he responded, "I'm not a random person, I'm your doctor." Well, I get he was trying to do his job. He's no longer my doctor, I've since switched, but it just didn't work. And again, he was trying to do his job, and I don't fault him for it, but I couldn't do it. And now I realize that time is almost up, and I'm sorry if I've rambled too much and bored you, but I can't thank you enough for being here. It means so much to myself, to the other panelists, that you came to hear us. As I said the other day, most of us dream of a world with full acceptance, and the first step to acceptance is access. How can people feel welcome if they can't physically get in or if they have to leave? So we live in a world now where we need more acceptance, and we need to respect each other more, and being here today, I think we've taken a step. Thank you.
My name is Victoria Esposito. I'm a junior, and my disability is dyslexia. And it's specifically saying dyslexia is more with the nerves, and they end up getting confused sometimes. And fortunately, people sometimes misunderstand dyslexia as something wrong with my eyesight or something else. When it's not quite something wrong with my eyesight, like confusing these and stuff. It's something more at a neurological level that you have to go and study for. And, well, basically, I ended up going through my life pretty normal until a certain age when I was having difficulty reading and keeping up with everyone else, and I kept wondering, why is this happening? And I got made fun of by a lot of people when I was younger because they kept calling me stupid for not being able to keep up or do what they could do. But I ended up getting past that, and I got some help for it. And dyslexia is not something you can go and cure, just something you can treat. Many people get that confused for things and say, there's a cure for everything, just take a magic pill. No, you cannot. And I'm pretty sure you can prove that. But anyways, I ended up just, instead of arguing with people, I normally tell them facts about things to try to shed some light on them. Sometimes it works, sometimes they ignore you and just continue saying their things that they like to say. And, well, I'm currently here today just trying to be more open and trying to talk about that. And, well, it's not about dyslexia is not about being stupid or being quote-unquote mentally retarded. It's just simply having more of a problem with, say, reading takes a little longer, mini scribe, or just like a audio textbook kind of thing. And it's simple as that, just going to getting the proper help. Getting someone else to just giving some extra time or in a test. And after that, it's pretty easy and I could go and be normal with everyone else. Honestly, the only time people really know when I have dyslexia is when I have to do a presentation or a writing piece or something just like in school-wise. No one really notices until I actually have to do work. And I've lived through it for a while, for like my entire life. I'm in college now, so I'm been able to succeed. I'm, doing pretty good. I'm an art major. And my grades are good, so I'm not like failing out of school, which people who sadly I've known would say I would by now, and I'm doing pretty good.
We're just going to take 1 second. Danielle, if you want to come up and join our panel. Let's add another panelist to the panel. Thanks. Andrew, if you want to take it away.
So, hi, my name is Andrew Bauch, and at 5 months, I was diagnosed with pervasive developmental disorder, but now it's called ADHD, and with a common, I think it was anxiety disorder, because I have trouble like speaking to a group of people. It's like in sports settings I can do it, but like when you got like presentation wise I get nervous, so that's what happens. So, and now this is what I so as I said, let's see, and then I have issues with friends. Like I have trust issues because my friends sometimes they ask me if because we do like group study for like biology test or like something like that, and they typically say like, oh, we will do it, but then they don't, and that's why I have trust issues, and I just want to like, I always imagine like, I'm like, so I wasn't prepared for this, but I just want to have like, so it's like I want to have friends I can trust with and like I can like study with, because if I have like a good study group, I can actually succeed in my classes, because in the past I had like biology, I keep struggling because I have flashcards, I do this, and then I do good, but it's not, I want to get like an A, so I want to get like, so I just want to have like, no, never mind. So about the presentation. So anxiety, I have like, so most of my friends think I'm normal, and then they said like, they see me as normal, and I said no, and then once they see me as like, my presentation said, oh, that's the reason why, yeah. And then pretty much it. And that's enough to say. And yeah, you can start.
Hey, I'm Cassandra White. I'm a freshman. I live with trigeminal neuralgia, which is a neurological disorder. It's a nerve pain, and it's your fifth cranial nerve, and has 3 branches. So mine is my V2 and V3, and what it feels like for me, it's not for everyone with this, but it feels like knife stabbing my face, electrifying. It feels like I'm just on fire, like a burn victim, and it has really sporadic like moments of pain. Like yesterday, just in class, like I just started like bawling my eyes out because I had this horrible pain attack, and like certain things could trigger it. Like today, like the really windy, cold air, like I knew that was like a nightmare for me to go out in, because that sensitive touch of like wind, cold air, my hair rubbing against my face, anything like that, it could be a really big trigger. I live in constant pain too, like just more dull version, and then I have these bad pain attacks. And I was just diagnosed with it in the summer of 2015. It was, some people can have it and then it develops typically when you're 50 to 80 years old. So mine was caused by a surgery though, where they cut some nerves in my like eye, and so it caused it. So it's pretty like confusing disorder. It's like not many people have heard of it. There's less than 200,000 cases per year in the US, and it is typically for older like guests. So it's pretty uncommon. I've never met anyone else with it, so that can be a little like troublesome, as no one else can truly relate. No one else I don't think feels like knives are stabbing them in the face. But so I have goals in my life where I want to get through school and I want to go to graduate school. So that's kind of my aim, to continue with everything. I know like Dina Sante has been very helpful with any of my testing accommodations, and like testing privately and like getting it broken up if I have a pain attack. I'm also blind in my right eye, so that just was caused 2 years ago as well. It's from a tumor. So for me, it just looks like I look pretty normal every day. I look healthy, so it's kind of hard for people to understand, like when I just start just holding my face or just start crying. I will dig my nails in my hand to try to produce pain and somewhere else, try to get the focus off of my face. And it looks pretty weird, honestly, because it's just very sporadic, and so living with that is a little bit difficult just because a lot of people just don't understand. But like I said, I have goals in my life and I want to get through it. This is a very painful condition, and it's also like a invisible disability, like Gianna said. It is called the suicide disease as well as a nickname, because the pain, it's so painful. There's just a very high number of suicides with this condition. But that's not something I plan to do or anything, because like I said, I have goals. Let's see. Sorry. But yeah, so what my life looks like, it looks fairly normal. I just go through day to day and kind of take it as it is, as it comes. Some days are really good, some days are really bad. I see doctors every month. I'm on lots of nerve pain medications. There's no cure for it. So I'm speaking on my behalf, everyone else has really said about this condition. Some people are affected worse, some people are affected not as bad. So that's just kind of what I deal with. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Hi, my name is Alexandra Roca. I'm deaf, so that's my disability. I was diagnosed to be as a profound deaf when I was born. I also have an older sister who's also deaf. And we're the only two in my family, aside from 2 cousins from my brother's side, so it's only the 4 of us. And everyone in my family is hearing, all of my friends are hearing, and it's tough because you can't tell that I'm deaf, but I am. I speak. I've gone to speech therapy my whole life. I've been in speech therapy since I was a little baby. And I went to a deaf school it was like a pre-kindergarten kind of program where my mom went with me and she learned how to communicate with me, I guess, until 2nd grade. And then after 2nd grade, I went to mainstream school. So I was in a hearing school since 2nd grade. And it's tough, I gotta tell you. It's really tough because I have a cochlear implant. I had a surgery when I was 6.5. So right now I have this device that's like attached to my head and it helps me hear. But it doesn't help me hear everything. So I don't hear everything that you guys do if you're not deaf. It's really hard because I don't do well in large groups, and I don't do well in like stuff like this because if a lot of people are talking at once, it's hard for me to really catch what they're saying, especially when someone's telling a joke and then everyone's like jumping in on the joke, and I'm just like, I don't know what you guys said, so I'm just gonna sit here and be quiet. So I really struggle with that, and it's hard because this world is such a hearing world. You have so many people that speak, and so many people can hear, and I can't hear you. Well, right now I can, but I don't hear as well as you do. So when it comes to like accommodation and accessibility, it's not easy for a deaf person in this world, because when you're on the train and the train is delayed, you're able to hear over the loudspeaker that the train is delayed or the train is canceled, and it won't be, coming around. I don't hear that. I hear like a jumble of crackling sounds and statics, and it's hard for me because then I have to ask some random person, oh, what did they say? I know it gets embarrassing when you're just tapping a person you don't know. It's like, can you help me? And in New York, it's not so easy to do that because, people have attitudes or whatever, the New York attitude. So, but I gotta deal with that. And also, when you watch a video on YouTube or on Facebook or even a movie, at the movies or on TV, you understand everything they're saying. I don't. I really have no idea what they're saying, especially animated films. Completely no idea. It goes over my head. I need captions. And it's hard because movie theaters don't provide captions on the screen, so I have to go up to someone and get this funky looking device and plug it into my seat, and sometimes doesn't even work. The last time it happened, didn't even work. And I missed half the movie because my captioning device didn't work. And that sucks because I paid for a ticket and I really want to enjoy this movie that was supposed to be awesome, and I just missed it. And because the devices are not updated, and it's just really tough. I'm actually in graduate school right now. I graduated from Wagner College in 2015 in psychology and education, and I decided I wanted to work in that field, especially with deaf kids, because I feel like I succeeded so much despite my disability. I want to be that person to motivate these deaf kids that they can succeed as well. So I'm in college right now going for school psychology, my master's in school psychology, and I want to be that person to help these kids by giving them assessments, writing up their IEPs so they can succeed in a classroom, because for me it was hard to be in a classroom with 30 other kids, and the teacher is the only person standing in the front of the room speaking, and I had paraprofessionals, I had note takers, I had the FM system, but still it's not the same experience. So I want to make sure that these kids have the best experience they can have to get their education. And talking about more accommodation and accessibility is when you're in a hospital, because I notice a lot of PAs here, a deaf person in a hospital is not great, because you have all these doctors and nurses and like walking in and out, and they're speaking so bad, and it's like you're missing everything. And my sister, it was like 2 years ago, she had a baby, and when she was pregnant, she's deaf, like I mentioned. It was hard for her because she lived in Florida and I lived in Staten Island, and I was there for a week to help her out with the pregnancy. She had a really tough pregnancy, and I was there for a week, and I went to the hospital with her, and she needed some stress tests for some reason, because she's older. She had to be when she was older. So the nurse came in, spoke to her, and left. And my sister was sitting in the bed like, I don't know what just happened. I don't know what she just told me. And I was lucky enough to be able to catch what she's hearing. Like, I heard what she said. But it's not easy because there's my sister. She's vulnerable. She's having a baby, and no one's really speaking to her. No one's facing her and telling her what she needed to hear. And that really hit me because it was like, what if something bad had happened? And my sister would have had no idea. because no one was making it clear for her. And they were giving her such a hard time about interpreters, and there's several ways you can get an interpreter as a deaf person. You can get a real life person as your interpreter, and you can get a TV, whereas the interpreter is not there in person, but she's somewhere else, and there's the TV, and you can speak through the TV. There's video phones, it's called BP. There's a lot of different ways, but no one was giving her that accommodation. They just came in and were like, oh, well, we couldn't find one. And my sister's like, well, you gotta find me one, like now, because you're telling me things and I'm lost. So I'm like, oh, well, yeah, And they just kept putting it off. That's not the way you treat a deaf patient, because there's things going on in hospitals and doctors' offices that they need to know. This is a serious condition. And nurses and doctors are not taking it seriously as they should have. Other things. The biggest thing with me is the captioning. Like, I need captions in my life because it's hard I can't enjoy a TV show or a movie without my captions, so. And also I'm watching, also concerts, horrible. Just people singing, and I'm just like, I don't go to concerts, I don't go to, like these festivals, Ultra, whatever they are, I don't know. I don't go to them because I can't understand what you're singing, so. If you want me to listen to a song, you need to give me the lyrics. And I'll listen to the song with you as long as I can follow along. So I stop. That's really it. I mean, there's a lot into it, but it's so much. I don't know if I can just keep talking about it. Also, there are several misconceptions. We can jive. Don't think that we can't jive. We can jive. I joke here, no problem. Also, all deaf people sign. I do know sign language, but I don't communicate in sign language with everyone I speak. And a lot of people think that deaf people should just sign, and they don't know how to lip read. I know how to lip read. I lip read since I was a little kid. And also, there's another thing. A lot of people think deaf people are stupid. We're not stupid. They just don't teach us the right way in school. And that's the biggest thing. When back then in the day, when parents had a kid that was deaf, they would just throw them in a school, call them an asylum. They would call them like mute, dumb and mute or something like that, and they just think, oh, because they can't hear you, they can't learn. That's not true. We can learn. You just gotta find the right way to teach us. That's all. You gotta really be patient with us, find other ways to communicate with us in sign language, communicate with us through other ways. Don't just assume that we can't hear you and we're stupid. So that's the biggest thing, the whole stupid thing really bothers me. And I don't know, I think that's it. There's more to say, but I can't talk for hours, so.
Hey, so I'm Danielle. I'm also known as the visually impaired girl, the hydrocephalus warrior, the shaky-eyed girl, and the list goes on. So I have what I call a dual disability. So my first one, or I should say my main one, is hydrocephalus, which is a buildup of fluid on your brain. So all of us have fluid that surrounds our brain, or else it would just be bouncing into our skull, and you don't want to know the repercussions of that. But this fluid is supposed to drain and then be re-put into your body naturally. When I was born, about 8 months later, we realized that my body wasn't doing that. And because of this, it affected the left side of my body, so it was on the right side of my brain, so the left side of my body is significantly weaker. So I can't do like certain hand movements. I can't really wave, but I can wave here. I can't really, like, when I walk, some people will notice that I walk with like a limp. So they'll ask me like how badly I hurt my ankle the night before, how badly I was partying, that I still have the repercussions of walking. And then my second disability, which was caused by the hydrocephalus because some of the fluid went behind my optic nerve, triggering what they call nystagmus in medical terms, or what I call shaky eyes for those of us who are not in the medical field. So basically it's an involuntary eye movement. So when I explain it to a small child or someone who's never heard of it and thinks that it's this like crazy out of world term, I explain it as my eyes are playing volleyball, so they'll just constantly dart back and forth. This typically is more noticeable when I'm either really stressed or anxious, so midterms and finals are my worst nightmare. or if I'm really tired again, which is triggered by things like working full-time, midterms, finals. So because of those two disabilities, I navigate the world and see the world quite differently. Similar to what Alex said, it unfortunately seems to be some kind of pattern where they think that disabled people can't learn. So I was advised, my mother was advised to put me in special ed when I started school, and I went to a typical normal preschool with other children. But when it came time to sign me up for kindergarten, because of my visual impairment, and keep in mind I was born in 1992, the Americans with Disability Act, which provides accommodations or allows organizations to provide us with accommodations, was fairly a new law by the time I got to kindergarten. So that really wasn't ironed out as to what to do with me, what I needed. So the answer that they gave my mother was, all right, just throw her in special ed, and she's not really gonna learn anyway, it's fine. So I stayed in special ed up until I was in 7th grade, while they tried to figure out my accommodations. So by the time I was in 3rd grade, my paraprofessional had this crazy idea at the time to enlarge everything for me. It's like, oh, well, they said she's visually impaired. Let's see what happens when we give her a little large print. Oh my God, she knows what 2 + 2 is. It's a miracle. So little by little, as my accommodations were fleshed out and as we trialed and errored like different ideas, they were able to kind of see like what I can and can't do. So that's a little bit about my back history. As far as where I am now, similar to Alex, I'm in graduate school, but I'm going for a master's/PhD in sociology at the New School. There I do get accommodations. So I have things like enlarged exams if there are any, or handouts. I also use an app on my iPad called VoiceStream, which allows me to input whatever my reading assignments are into the app, and it'll read it to me and then enlarge it and highlight for me so I can follow along while listening to it, which has been like life-changing. Oh my God. And then as far as my disabilities and approaching me about them, I'm an open book. So I'm you want to know something, just ask me. I don't care how you ask me, and I will just let you know how it works. It's tough for me to navigate with my eyes shaking, which is definitely, I would say, my biggest challenge, because that also, along with the fluid on my brain, screws with my balance super badly. So I have had a couple of bad falls. I've sprained my ankle a bunch of times. Most recently, I shouldn't say recently, it was back in November, but fairly recently I broke my first bone. I fractured my kneecap because I didn't see a crack in the sidewalk. And hobbling around on crutches for 6 weeks was not the best thing to do to someone who's balance impaired. But physically the world is tough, so it's just me trying to figure out like how to navigate that as best as I can. So just little tricks and odds and ends. I think that's really it, unless anyone has specific questions.
All right, well, thank you, panelists. Just a big round of applause for everyone on panel. So now we're going to enter the second part of this panel event. And basically, just before we go into that, I just want to give everyone an idea as to what it is Exceeding the Expectation does. What we do is we create a network of students with disabilities and their allies to tackle issues on campus and off. And we've been very successful thus far in working with administrators, working with outside forces to approach issues on campus and to start this discussion. But the purpose of this event today is to connect with you, the students. And I know that for a lot of you, you are PAs, you are nurses. A lot of you are going into fields where you'll be, well, actually most of us will directly in one way or other be working with other people with certain disabilities and such. And so before I get into some of the questions that I've come up with from what these guys had to give us, is there anything that anyone wants to ask any of the panelists, or any questions that jump at anyone? Yes?
Sorry, no questions, more of a comment.
Sure.
I just want you guys to realize that like all your disabilities are huge challenges, and the fact you guys are as successful as all you guys are is awesome. Like you guys are graduates, you're in college, you're getting degrees, like you guys are not letting your disability like hold you back. I applaud that. That's awesome.
Anyone else? All right, so we're just going to go right into a couple of questions that we've come up with for you guys. So something that stood out to me before we kind of get into the conversation of Wagner specific, whether it be issues or experiences that happen on campus, something that stood out to me was that the topic of language came up a lot. Gianna, you talked about language, you talked about the word normal. Without quotations around it, whereas Danielle, you talked about the word normal with quotations around it. Or Jen, you talked about how in your lifetime you've gone from being sort of the definition of it was Asperger's, and you watched as it's transitioned into being on the autism spectrum. And so I'm just curious, a question I have for for all of you is what role do you think that, whether it be names, language, what role does that play in your experience as somebody living with a disability? Whether it be language that it is used, whether it be definitions, or whether it be, for example, disability first language or a person first language. What's your experience with that, and has that shifted over time? You want to take it, Danielle?
So growing up, I only knew person first language. I was always referred to as the person with a disability, the girl with a disability, the girl with the visual impairment. And then it wasn't until I got to graduate school at the CUNY School of Professional Studies, where I was going for my MA in Disability Studies, where I learned that there are other options. So now I would say that my experience with language is kind of what I call dual language. So I still use person first language when I feel it's necessary, especially if I want people to see beyond my visual impairment or the hydrocephalus. I'm just like, hey, I have other aspects of my identity. Like, I also enjoy playing volleyball and listening to music and going to concerts and being this, woman just experiencing life. But then there are moments where I have to remind people, like, hey, I do come with some limitations. I do need some accommodations. So that is when I use what they call identity first language, which instead of referring to myself as a person with a disability, I'll refer to myself as a disabled person. The same rules apply. It's usually when I want people to acknowledge my disability and really understand that I do need certain accommodations in order to really either succeed in school, work, or just life in general. But I also use it for those of us who prefer that language. So I'm very sensitive to other people's preferences and how they understand disability, because I don't want it to be a very scary, unknown event. Like, I want people to see that I'm approachable. Again, this is just my experience, so I don't want everyone leaving here being like, oh, I could go up to any disabled person or any person with a disability and just have these conversations. But as far as the word normal, like Dan suggested, as we say in disability studies, normal is just a drier setting. Like, we don't really see normal. We see it as just, our experiences navigating the world. They're not any different. They're not something that needs to be shut out in a way. Like, if I use a cane to get up on a high curb, I use a cane to get up on a high curb. The same way you guys just step onto the sidewalk and keep going, I might do that with a little assistance from a cane. But that doesn't mean that I can't navigate the world, or I shouldn't navigate the world, or, I have difficulty per se. It just might mean that I need another approach, or it takes a little bit longer. Another word that I would caution with is the word retarded. So if you're referring to someone with an intellectual disability or someone who might be quote unquote slower than you, do not use the word retarded. It's outdated. It's still unfortunately used in our court system, but it started from very, very dated, ancient IQ testing and just kind of has morphed into something that people use as a joke, particularly young people, teenagers. They'll say oh, that move you just did was so retarded, that, look you just made was so retarded. And really, that's not what the word was used for. That's not what it's meant for. It's not meant as a joke. It's not meant as a pun. So I guess my advice for anyone is just, be careful with language and really think before you speak, because words they are powerful. They really hit people, and you don't know what people's experiences were with those labels, those words. So really, I really wanted you to think about phrasing and word use when you leave here today.
Also, but anyway, with the deaf disability, we have deaf and hearing impaired. I'm deaf. I'm not hearing impaired. And people think that because I have an implant, I'm automatically hearing impaired, because now I can hear you a little. And I'm quick to correct you. I am deaf. I will always be deaf. I've been born deaf. just because I have a cochlear implant doesn't mean I should. You know, I still have a disability. When I take it off, I can't hear you at all. So be careful because some disabilities have different words they use to describe, like they have different, like autism, there's a spectrum. So it's just be careful when you use the word to describe them. They are deaf and hearing impaired. One person is diagnosed as deaf, one person is diagnosed as hearing impaired. They cannot be impaired, cannot be deaf, and the deaf cannot be hearing impaired. So you just got to be really careful when you use those words to describe the disability.
Also, in psychology, as I learned in Psych 101, there's no definition of the word normal in psychology. There's actually just people are who they are. Everyone has, if you diagnose everybody's like nitpick at everyone's personality, you could find any number of a fancy term. You could probably find, like throw a dart in a room or a crowd, you find someone with OCD habits of just being normal.
Before we direct the conversation to talking about the Wagner climate here, I know we have a lot of PAs and we have a lot of nurses and a lot of different pre-professional medical people in the room. Is there anything that you wish to let them know? What would you want them to leave this afternoon with, specifically? Yeah.
I mean, just really pay attention to your patients. If they're telling you something does not work for them, don't force them to do it. If they're telling you that something is hurting them, they know their body. Like with people with hydrocephalus, including myself, one of the biggest issues we encounter in the hospital, because a shunt malfunction, the shunt is the tube that actually like helps me drain the fluid. So when those tubes malfunction, because they are based on a 1955, I know that's ages ago, treatment, they do malfunction. So when we go in, the malfunction symptoms are very much similar to if you have a stomach virus. We'll be vomiting, we'll have a severe headache. We're very sensitive to light and sound, so even if like you're whispering in our ear, it sounds like you're screaming at us with the megaphone. So a lot of people just dismiss those. Like my first and only shunt malfunction in 2005, I went to my pediatrician and he took my vitals and she goes, no, you're fine, you're fine. No, I'm telling you there's something wrong. No, you're fine, it's just a stomach virus, and sent me home. 3 days later, I was being rushed to NYU because now I can't see, I can't really hear you, I can't lift my head off a pillow, can't keep anything down. I don't think that's just a stomach virus, I don't think that's normal. So if your patients are really, really, really telling you something, even if your scans are coming back perfect, even if, you know, this person is known for maybe exaggerating or they come to you for every little thing because they're afraid, really, really listen to them because one overlook could be something very serious.
And to piggyback off of what Danielle said, just be empathetic. Like my mom was told when I was going for an MRI when I was like 3, you know, they were like, she has to lay down in the tube. I can't lay down, I can't stay still for 2 seconds. And like my poor mother at the time, again, dealing with the whole society of having a disability is a bad thing, she's a wreck. She doesn't know what's going on. She just wants to know, and now I can't go into the tube because I can't stay still for them to do the MRI. And they were like, well, we can't help you, give her the medication. And she left there in tears. She was like, you're gonna tell me that my kid is the only kid that you haven't been able to give this medication to? So they ended up having to reschedule the appointment. My dad had to take a day off of work, and they had to go together for me to get the test done. So just be a little empathetic. I mean, I know as professionals, you have a job, and again, I have a job as a teacher too. But just in general, I think we need to be more empathetic as a society.
Absolutely.
Also, I do know that as people who are in the medical field, they're like, next patient, next kind of thing they have to do, running off to next person or something, hardly even having time to break or something else that I've been told. Even though I do understand that, it's just, it's good to go and listen to people whenever they're saying something, even though like what you were saying for test-wise could be okay, but then it could be like just some small little trigger, so it could affect something 3 days later, and person could be in a coma or something. Well, not that dramatic, but something else could go wrong because something else could spiral into something worse. And it's a good idea even if the person may have signs of a hypochondriac, I believe. when you have a problem of you thinking, oh, I stubbed my toe's broken. Even though it's something else like that, there could be a good reason why they're that afraid of something, sadly.
Absolutely. So kind of talking about your school experience, a common theme through a lot of your stories, whether it was Gianna talking about how there were certain accommodations made when it came to leaving classes early, or when Victoria, you talked about how you may have not had the most positive experience in elementary school, middle school with bullying. Can you tell us a bit about, as a child, going from K to 12 to college, what that transition was like in your education, as far as do you feel whether it be more positive or more negative, what were the differences between your experience in K to 12 in the school system and now being here at Wagner College?
For me, when I was in K through 12th grade, first and second grade, I was, normal. Everything was easy and stuff. A little bit of like second grade and third grade, things got a little harder with reading, and like teachers didn't know why, and they thought I was being lazy sometimes when I wasn't, and I was trying. I got like pushed into being like forced to like work 10 times harder than everyone else around me just to keep up with everyone. So I ended up like no one really understood how hard I was working. Just like to do something simple like write some paper kind of thing. I wouldn't be that like good at say writing as much as everyone else. Like the person next to me could like write some 5-page paper in like a day or something because I stay up all night doing whatever, like interviewing kind of thing. And like I wouldn't really be able to write as much as them, or I'd like be like writing a fraction of whatever they write, just because I would be trying to like read something else or just trying to understand something. What I mean by understand something doesn't mean I'm not intelligent enough to understand things. It just means like if I read something, I may need like to read it over again to fully understand it, or something like that specifically. And do you want to say something?
I have to say, actually, my transition from K to 12 to college was actually a very positive one. I think because I knew myself and I had come to terms with my limitations and I knew how to advocate and how to explain it. But I know like Wagner does the 4-day orientation, Thursday to Sunday, and then we start classes Monday. And as luck would have it, my cousin got married in California that same weekend. So I was forced with the choice of like, do I miss the wedding and not miss seeing my family, or do I miss orientation? I remember the big back and forth fight in my house. Because I was like, I'm going to this wedding, I'm going to see my family. My parents were like, no, you don't want to go into college without knowing anybody. You're going to be off guard. You've had social issues anyway. I think you should go. And I was like, no, I really want to go to this wedding. So Dina advised me to email my professors and say like, listen, I'm not going to be at orientation, but I am going to be in class. Because again, it's a scary time going from high school to college. But my professors were very accommodating. I think again, because I knew myself and I knew what I had to do, that maybe I didn't know in K to 12, because in K to 12, your parents do everything for you and everybody's there to do things for you, but once you have to do it on your own, you learn. So I must say it was a good transition.
To piggyback off of what Jen said, my K through 12 experience was very, I guess, coddling. Because I was visually impaired and because of my balance issues, my schools really pushed me having a paraprofessional. Which worked nicely when I was in elementary school, wasn't really so nice by the time I got to high school. So elementary school, believe it or not, my para was very like hands off. Like, all right, I'm gonna let her go in the schoolyard, I'm gonna let her play with her friends, I'm gonna let her get dirty. If she falls and scrapes her knee, that's what every other kid is doing. So she's gonna fall, scrape her knee, we'll put a Band-Aid on it and she'll be good to go. By the time I got into high school, it was a very different experience. They took their job, what I would consider, way too seriously, to the point where they would follow me to and from my classes. If I saw, say, one of my friends in the hallway, I was not allowed to stop and say hello. So I really missed out a lot on that socialization time, where by the time I got to college, obviously there was no one following me. You're here to do it all on yourself, and it was just kind of this liberating experience of being able to make the choice of, do I have enough time to get food in the dining hall before going to class? Do I have enough time to, go and talk to my friend and, exchange books or something, or work on a group project before running to class? And being able to make those decisions was just super, super, super liberating. I mean, don't get me wrong, like Wagner obviously allowed me to have my accommodations. I had the disability supports. But what I didn't have in high school that I got in college was this freedom and this chance to kind of decide for myself, and actually this chance to have friends and socialize. Because of my powers in K through 12, I really didn't have a lot of friends, because who's really going to be friends with the girl who has almost like a mother figure following her all the time? Especially not in high school. You know, you're supposed to be this rebellious teen. Mom's not going to know everything. And then here we are having basically some mother figure following me and reporting to my parents what's happening. So, you know, college for me, it was just more of a big social transition.
I'll continue on what I was saying before. Even though, yes, I did go into succeeding classes from K through 12, obviously I'm here. I did go through a lot of bullying, sadly, through my years. People would either be very ignorant of what dyslexia even was. They'd call it retarded problem, or they'd call it some weird thing, or they'd quote-unquote try to play doctor with me, and they'd be the doctor and I'd be the patient. They're trying to diagnose me without any medical training or any ounce of, any doctor textbook. They probably just got some random thing online. And they were basically describing some other disorder, basically not dyslexia. Let's just say that. No idea what they were trying to explain to me, though.
Awesome. Yeah, so continuing this conversation about what we have going on here on campus, Andrew, you made a really, really strong point when you talked about how for you personally, working in study groups can be a really good tool for you. And Cassandra, you talked about how having an invisible disability, you have peers sometimes who are not always aware of it, and that's your personal choice whether you want them to know about that part of you or not. And so I guess that's the question I want to pose to the panel now, which is, since you're in front of a room full of your peers, what do you want your peers to know as far as what they can do for you personally? And of course, we can only speak for our personal experiences, as we keep saying, but I guess in a broader sense, what do you think your peers can do when working with students who have disabilities and working with their peers? Yeah.
Yeah, so just be mindful of people. Don't automatically assume and judge right away that, oh, a person may look healthy or a person may look like they have a disability, but you never know what that person's going through. So just be mindful of that.
To bounce off of what Gianna just said, also, if you see a person who maybe will be more visible, I float in between the lines of invisible and visible when I have my cane with me. So obviously on the days when I have my cane with me, I look more disabled. And obviously it's a red flag that, I am a disabled person. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm lost or need help. One of the biggest misconceptions that I've had in my personal experience, and again, it's my personal experience, is that people with their heart in the right place really try to help, but what you're really doing is either A, making a show out of it, so it's embarrassing for me, and then you, when you figure out, oh my God, she doesn't need help. And two, you might also be throwing off my balance. The way I walk and the way I do things are specific for me so that I can keep things like my balance going. I might need to stop and assess things because my eyes might be flickering. So that might be the difference between me falling over a crack in the sidewalk or walking in the middle of the street when a car's coming, because I'm taking a little longer. So don't necessarily assume that someone needs help and swoop in. I mean, you can ask if it looks like the person's having trouble, but if they do tell you no, then just leave it at no. Don't insist, don't assume. They probably have it, they probably have found ways to adapt, and they probably know what they're doing.
Yeah, to piggyback off what Danielle was saying, just ask, ask politely, but ask. If you somebody that might need help, ask, do you need help? And most of us, if you come across it in a polite way, are willing to respond honestly, because again, like Danielle was saying, the worst thing to do is to assume and then make more of a problem than there is without it.
Awesome. So before we get to the final question, I just want to open the floor up to all of you again. If anyone has any questions, whether they be for the entire panel, an individual panelist, before we wrap up. Any? Awesome. All right, so I guess the final question, we want to leave it on a optimistic, positive note. So I guess that my final question for you guys is sort of, I guess, as an act of positive reinforcement for the audience, what are the positive things that you see your peers doing that they may not realize they're doing that have helped you, or that you feel have created a more positive climate on campus for students with disabilities?
I guess just being a nice everyday person. So if you see me coming holding a door, or, you know, maybe including disability in your class conversations, or maybe suggesting to your professor, you know, hey, there's this text on disability, or be mindful of an accommodation, or even just allowing the disability talk to happen. My time at Wagner, I graduated in 2014, was a lot of just allowing the disability conversations to take place, and it was a very safe and open space. So I was able to express my concerns, my needs, things that were going well, things that were going not so well. But just, I mean, I guess I would leave you with just try to be open and, you know, mindful, and just allow the disability conversation to happen.
To build off of what she was saying, also, like if someone in a classroom, say a teacher needs, or a student needs to talk to a teacher about disability things, don't have like the entire room saying, oh, she has a disability, and like have everyone snickering and laughing, saying, oh, she's so stupid, or oh, she needs help, or she's crippled or something. Like, don't have people doing that. Has happened to me. I've been called stupid very loudly to my face sometimes in college. Heart-wrenchingly college, not K through 12. So yeah, I've had that happen. It hurts, and I can hear you. So other than that, I would say just make it more open. Be able to, like, if someone has a problem, just let the kid talk and not have to worry about being laughed at for or humiliated publicly that she has a problem or he has a problem.
Yeah, like I know for me, a lot of like my friends that I've met, like Gianna, she was really open about what like her disability is, and like I have severe arthritis in my joints, so I was able to relate, and like having someone to relate was really awesome. And also just having someone to like listen and understand and like show like they want to care and just see what's up. Or like a lot of my classmates, like if I have like a pain attack, like they're pretty cool about it. Like they're like, are you okay? Like, do you need anything? So something just like as simple as that really like can change the day a lot.
Also, we have a final round of applause for our panelists. We'd like to thank everyone who came out today. We'd also like to let you know that if this sparked a conversation, if this is something that you really grabbed onto, we do meet every Thursday at 5 o'clock in the case office. We'll be sticking around, so if you feel like joining Exceeding the Expectation, if you want to catch us for conversation, we'll be sticking around, and we hope you have a great weekend. Thank you for joining us.